Hey guys, Aurora here from Aurora Talks Knit. I'm bringing you a video on the mattress stitch today. I have always avoided knitting sweaters that need to be seamed together because I was always terrible at seaming until I met the mattress stitch. I'm currently working on the Oxford Boyfriend cardigan, and that's by Alexandra Tavel. And it's so chunky and so awesome and very cozy, and I can't wait to put it on. But my problem now is I've blocked all my pieces and I have to seam them all together. So while I'm doing that, I'm going to demonstrate to you how to use the mattress stitch to do that. Now, the first thing we want to notice is we've got several different directions that the knitting is going. You can see I've already seamed together this sleeve, and this one has yet to be done. There's 3 different seams that we're using here. So this seam is the most complicated one because you have knitting going this way, and then you have knitting going this way that you have to join. So if you think about your knitting as columns and rows, okay, so we all know what rows are. This was a row, this is a row, there's 2 white rows, and then it continues down. Well, if you think about the arrows pointing down, or the little hearts, this would be a column and 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 a column. You get the idea. The columns are basically how many you cast on, how wide it is right there. So in this case, I'm going to say this is columns to rows, because when you turn it on its side, you are trying to connect each of these columns on this side to a row on this side. So this is going to be columns to rows. This down here is a side seam. Now, honestly, it's kind of difficult to see. You can see just a little bit that these 2 are slightly uneven, but you can't even tell that there is a seam here. If I open it up, then you'll see there definitely is a seam on the inside. So what we're doing here is we are sewing row to row. So we've got a row here and a row here, and we want to match the rows as we go right through there. Now, the last kind is up here at the shoulder. So you can see I've seamed my shoulder together, and I've got columns here, and I want to match the columns here with the columns here. So the great part about the mattress stitch is that it covers all 3. So let's check it out. Okay, the first tool I need is a very large darning needle. Okay, with a large eye. I am using Big Wool by Independence Street Yarn. This is the colorway London Fog. And you can tell it's a very chunky yarn, so I need a nice big eye in my darning needle. Now I have about 2 arms lengths worth of yarn here that I'm going to use for my seaming. It is the worst when you run out, so you always want to get just over what you need. All right, so I'm going to bring in the shoulder here, and this is the back side of my Oxford cardigan, and then I'm going to bring in the front, and I want to seam the 2 of these together. Now, if you look carefully, you'll know if rows go this way, these are columns. So this is going to be a column-to-column join. So let me get my darning needle out, and I'm going to start right here, and I'm just going to go right through the corner, and I am going to pull all of this through. And of course, this takes a lot of patience and time to do each stitch because you have so much yarn to pull through. All right, so I'm going to pull it through until I have a reasonably sized tail, which I will set aside. And then I am going to begin to join my first column. So I'm going to come over here, and you can see that there's a column of stitches running right here, and here's the little heart shape. There's the legs of that column there. You can see here's the one next door, here's the one next door. So if you think of them all pointing downward, points down, points down, points down. You can easily find your columns. So I'm going to slip my darning needle under the 2 legs of the very first stitch of my very first column. And then I'm going to try to muster all of my patience to pull all of this through. All right, now I'm not going to pull it tight just yet. I'm going to leave a little bit of a space here. So now it's time to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to jump across here, and here's my column. My hearts will be facing the other direction because these are top to top here. So I'm going to find that first stitch in that column. See that? I'm going to go under those 2 legs, and I'm going to pull it like so. Now I'm going to continue in this manner. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go under the next 2 legs. Now the great part about this method is that you can see where the strand is coming out from your previous stitch. You're going to go back in that same hole and pick up the next 2 legs from the next column, just like that. Easy peasy. And then of course we're going to hop across. Here's where this one goes in. So we're going to go right under there and pull away. Now we're starting to get to the shaping here, and you can see I've been putting my thread in here, but now I'm going to have to put it a row below, and that's fine. You just keep going. You can always adjust the tightness or looseness of your mattress stitch since it's technically a continuing running stitch. All right, so we've got plenty of this done. Let's go ahead and give this a tug and get this all seamed together. So as you pull, all of the little loops are going to disappear, and you are going to have a very nice shoulder seam, just like that. And that's how you do column to column. Okay, the second thing we're going to talk about is doing a column to a row. If you look where I'm at on my sweater, I have just joined this seam. So this is the front and this is the back. Now it's time to set the sleeve. And you can see I have a sleeve right here. So again, this is up and down and this is sideways. So this is going to be columns to rows, just like that. Even on this side, when we come down this edge right here, this is a column here, or these are columns this way, and they need to go to the rows over here. So we've got a combination of both going on here. Now in this case, you might have more columns than rows, or more rows than columns that you need to join together. So you could count all the columns on one edge and then count all the rows on another. That way, if you have more up here and less down here, you know you're going to have to skip a couple up here in order to make them turn out even. So we're going to do a little counting, and then I'm also going to show you how you can wing it to make it fit. Okay, here's the corner of my sleeve. I need to sew around this edge right here. Now, the interesting part of this is I'm sewing columns to rows. So where do I start here? Do I start down here and stretch it? Do I just kind of eyeball it? Well, in this case, it's pretty easy to count. So I'm just going to roll this over. And if I'm looking at these rows going down this way, let me move this a little bit better into view here. If I'm going down this way, here's my little hearts, right? They're pointing down because this is the top of the work. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns. All right, so fair enough. Let's start at the 6th row down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this guy is where I am going to start in here. Now, if you hold it up together like so, even though those match, that means this is going to be stretched a little bit, or this is going to be crumpled a little bit to fit. So if you see that when you count the rows and you count the columns and they don't match up, then it's time to eyeball it. So I'm going to show you how to do that method. Now with this one, it's pretty easy because I can line it right up here, and it's pretty easy for me to know that this laying naturally next to this, which is also laying naturally, is going to end up right at the same spot and be exactly even. So let's quickly go through this. We're going to start right in here, just like we did before, leaving a tail hanging out the back side. I've got a reasonably sized tail there. All right, now on this side, we no longer have two legs to go underneath. So earlier across the column, you would go like this, but instead, when you go up a row, you're going to go in the middle of the row. So here's a heart right here. This is the stitch we want to start with. You can see the heart comes to a point right there. I'm just going to go underneath it, and I'm actually grabbing the head of the stitch below it. Okay, so you can see this goes all the way around like this. I'm going to grab that piece right there, and that is what I'm going to go under, the head of the stitch between the little legs of the stitch above it. All right, so now I'm going to give this a pull. And of course, again, I'm not going to pull it real tight. I'm just going to leave it a little bit loose for now so we can watch the magic happen. Now we're going to come over here. We are now back at columns. So we know the drill here. There's their first column right there. We're going to go right under the two legs of the first stitch in that column. Now, we're going to come back over here. You can see we've already gone into this hole, so we're going to move up a hole. We're going to scoop in there, and we're going to scoop the head of that stitch, and we are going to pull. Back over here to columns. All right, let's take a look at this. We know we have 1, 2, 3 columns left, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows left over here. So that means in order to make this to fit, I need to skip one. So here we are. We can see it's going in there. Instead of grabbing this one, I'm going to skip it and go to the next one. That way this will get a nicer fit. All right, back over here to the next column. All right, so now we are getting to our last stitch on this side, and we have to turn a corner here. Okay, so let's just show where we are. We now have to go this direction. So what I'm going to do is I've gone on my last column over here. Now I have to switch to columns on this side. So I'm going to grab my first column right here, and I'm going to pull this through. Now, let's take a minute to tighten this up because I'm going to need some of the yarn that's coming from this. So I'm just going to pull on both ends and get that seam nice and tight, just like that. Look at that. All right, so now it's time to continue across the top. So I have gone under my first column. Now we got to go for a row, which there's one. Let's see. Here's a row. Oh, there's one right there. Okay. Let's pull that. We're going to go under our next column. So I'm going to get going a little ways here. Because this is a much larger span all the way to here, it's going to be difficult to tell how many we need to skip in order to make them even. So I'm going to do a little bit and then we're going to evaluate. I'm going to do a 1-to-1 ratio for a little while and then we're going to check how we're doing. Okay, so I've just pulled that nice and tight, and of course you don't want to sew don't want to sew too far or you lose your leverage when you're pulling and you won't be able to sew that seam tight. But that looks pretty good. We have a real nice seam here and we've got a really nice seam there and it's pulled nice and tight. So let's just get a wider angle here so you guys can see the whole thing. Okay, so if we spread this out and we let it lay naturally, we've got a problem over here. Okay, so we need this to be matched with this as these lay nice and relaxed. And you can see we've got a gap here. So I am going to do a ratio of 1 to 2. So okay, let's see. I'm going to just pull this a little loose so I see where I went. Okay, so I'm back down here at columns. So I'm going to do a column here. And then up here, I can either skip one or I can go under 1 and 2. Aha, aha. Then I'm going to go back down here to columns. And I don't think I'll skip 2 right. I won't do another 2 skip right in a row because I feel like that could pinch your seam and it might be a little more obvious that you kind of squished it together. So I'll go for a couple 1-to-1 ratio. All right, and now I will go ahead and go under 1, under 2, just like that. That will help. Now this is a pretty firm edge right here, so that'll mostly stretch this out a little bit. So it won't look too distorted, which is great. We definitely don't want any distortion, so that's why you don't want to do 2 of these in a row and cause a bunch. This will be such a subtle decrease or increase depending on which side. It'll be a decrease up here and an increase kind of down here. So it will be very hidden because you are spreading them out. All right, now we're going to go up here. And just for good measure, I'm going to go ahead and do 1 more 2 together. And then we're going to stop. We're going to pull it nice and tight. Yeah, so satisfying. And you can tell in here we did a couple of the 2-to-1 ratios. You can't even tell. It just is laying just beautifully. So now let's go over and take a look. And now you see that this is lined up quite a bit better. So as you go along, you'll want to constantly do a ratio of 1-to-1, then throw a couple of 1-to-2s in there, and then see exactly how that's working for you as you compare the length. Now, the other thing you can do is using stitch markers. You can find the middle of both pieces. If it's a really long piece, you can divide it into thirds or quarters. That way you're only paying attention to one little strip at a time, and it makes it a lot easier. All right, the last method is row to row, so let's check that out. So we just finished that seam, and luckily I still have a whole big bunch of yarn left over where my seam ended. So I'm going to continue this. This is the armpit here, and I am going to continue right down the sleeve. Now this is great because we've got these lovely stripes to help us match our pattern up. So we know that if we didn't do the right row, and then you can realize that you're not catching the right amount of stitches on either side. So we're going to go ahead and get started on this. I'm going to bring this part of the sleeve up here, and then I'm going to turn this in like this. That way the raw edges, the selvage edges, are meeting. And let's get acclimated here. Let's get zoomed in. Okay. So we've already started on this side, and we know we're going to go row to row here. So we're not going in under any legs, we're just going to go right along the edge. Now, if you find it difficult to figure out which row you're supposed to go into, you'll see that pretty much the first row that is showing, you leave the rolled edge just kind of in there. So if I pull this out a little further, you can see it's kind of a row. It looks weird. That's your selvage edge. All of this, you want to ignore all of that. So this would be the row we're going to use. So I'm going to just duck into that row, and I'm going to grab a leg, and I'm going to pull. Then I'm going to come over to this side. I'm going to come under here, grab a leg, and pull. And that's all there is to that. Now, when you are doing row to row like this, you can very easily do the two method on both sides, just like this. Because I have some color work down here in the form of some stripes, I am going to do a 1-to-1 ratio for sure through that area, because I do not want any of that to pinch or pull or distort or make my stripe odd. So I'm just going to keep going until we get down there. All right, so now I am at my stripes here. So on the selvage edge, when I go under the first loop, you'll see this one is white. So I want to make sure and match that on the other side. So we're going to come over here, and we'll go under here, and the first one is white. So that is how you know when you reach a certain color that you are on the right track there. And then you just, of course, keep going all the way to the end, pulling nice and tight as you go to create that really nice row-to-row seam. And that is all there is to the mattress stitch. It is super forgiving, super wonderful, and of course now all I want to do is find sweaters that need to be seamed together. So thanks for joining me. Hope that helped you guys. See you next time.